Ever since I started this YouTube channel, I've been getting a lot of comments, requests about the different types of videos and initiatives that you would want me to bring on this channel. The first and the biggest request that most of the students have is to start an answer writing initiative. That is to help you understand how to write a good answer in the mains examination, how to understand the questions, what are the things to keep in mind while answering questions. So here I am starting this new answer writing initiative. In this initiative, I will be giving you answers to some of the questions that UPSC has also asked in the past. We'll be discussing the structure of such answers, and I want you also to be extremely attentive and regular in this series. So at the end of each and every class, I will be giving you a homework. What you have to do is write an answer and I will give you a feedback. You can leave the answer in the comment section. You can also mail me your answers and I will be giving you feedback on how did you write the answer, what can you do better. So this has to be a partnership between you and me. I will be regular, but as regular as you are here. So make sure that you do keep an eye on every video of this series and also complete the homework given at the end of every class. Now, there is no secret that the mains question papers require you to have great answer writing skills. In the mains examination, you have hundreds of questions where you would have to write answers in very small amount of time. That is why it's important for you to understand the structure of the answers, what to write, what not to write, what to avoid, and what to include. Now, mainly, most of the questions, when you try and write their answers, will have three parts to their answer. And I'm sure all of you are very well aware of these. The three parts are introduction, the main body, and the conclusion or the way forward. Now, how do you divide the words? Ideally, 10% of the word limit should go to the introduction part, 10% to the conclusion part, and remaining 80% to the main body. Meaning that if, let's say, you have been given 200 words of limit to write a particular answer, maybe 20 words for introduction, 20 for conclusion, and about 160 words for the main body will suit you fine. Now, this obviously can change here and there. For example, when you're writing a way forward, giving certain suggestions, it might go up to 35-40 words, but it really depends on what kind of question you're answering. So this is no one single way to write the answer. This is just a fair bit of idea, a rough idea of how to divide the words as and when you try and write the answer. Now, the most difficult part is what to write. Everyone can tell you start with the introduction, then come to the main body, then the conclusion. That is fine. But the biggest question is, how do you start with the introduction? Now, if you look at the introduction part, the easiest way to write an introduction is either write a fact or a definition, depending upon the question. And I'll give you some examples also. Either write a fact or a definition about the key word in the question. Let me give you some examples. These are the questions that UPSC asked in the past few years in the mains examination. Mostly these are from GS1, GS2. If you look at this, let's say the first question. Discuss the consequences of climate change on food security in tropical countries. Now try and see what is the keyword. Keyword means what is the question about. There are two keywords here, climate change and food security. The question is asking the impact or the consequences that climate change has on the food security, mainly in tropical countries. Now, you cannot give a definition of what is food security. This is very basic. You can't just give basic definitions. You can't give a definition of what is climate change. Everyone knows this. In these kind of questions, when there is no technical keyword to give a definition, it's important to start with a fact. Fact about what? Fact about climate change, fact about food security. Let's assume recently you might have read a report, let's say related to global hunger index. If you remember any important point from such a report, then you can start the answer with that particular example. For example, if you have read in the global hunger index report that climate change is a big factor in reducing amount of food supply, then you can start with there. But in these kind of questions, it's important when you don't have much to define, start with a fact. Obviously, if you don't know a fact, then you can't do anything. Then you have to start with a definition or a very generic line. Second, who are entitled to receive free legal aid? Assess the role of National Legal Service Authority in rendering free legal aid in India. Now, this again is an interesting question. Here you can again write either a fact or a definition to begin. Definition or a fact. Now, here you can easily give a fact about NALSA. When did it come into being? Who heads NALSA? What is the law behind NALSA? Or what is the objective that they are trying to achieve? Something like that. Very easy, basic. But the keyword here is NALSA because this is where the question is based on. So again, the good introduction here could be something about NALSA. Third, explain why suicide among young women is increasing in Indian society. Now again, a question where you can't really give any definition. You can't tell what is suicide, you can't tell what is a woman, you can't tell what is Indian society. These are not things that you can define. This is where you have to start with a fact. Now, these kind of questions are usually difficult to start. Why? They are difficult to start because if you don't know a fact about women's suicide in India, then it becomes very problematic. How do you start? You cannot make up a fact. I would highly advise you, if you are not sure about a fact, if you are not sure about a number, a data point, please do not use that in the examination. It will go against you. So over here, how do you begin? This is where it has to be dependent on your preparation. When you prepare for the mains examination, you have to identify certain themes that are repeated every single year. For example, there are themes on which the questions are asked very regularly. For example, suicide, poverty, farmer distress, climate change, renewable energy. These are some of those themes on which you will see one or two questions every single year. So when you are prepared with this, it is always advisable to keep some facts ready with all of these topics while you are preparing. Because 80% chances are that some of this will be asked. If you don't have a fact ready about suicide in India, about farmer distress, poverty, and this question comes in, you will not be able to write a good answer. This is where you might write a very generic answer and you will feel, oh, I have attempted a good question, but the marks will not be up to your expectations. The reason why many people get low marks, even after they think they have written a good answer, is because you have not written an exact answer filled with facts. You have just written a very generic answer which does not suit the requirements of this examination. So make sure that you are aware of facts on these important topics. Anyone can make a list of these topics. This is not a very hidden list. Analyze previous year papers of a few years and you will be able to understand these are the questions, these are the topics that will keep on getting repeated time and time again. Then a question, discuss natural resource potentials of Deccan Trap. Now over here again, Deccan Trap is something that you can define. Either give a fact about Deccan Trap or tell definition of what is Deccan Trap. So depending upon what the question is, you can either go for a fact or you can go for a definition, which is usually the best form of introduction. After the introduction comes the main body. Main body is where you will have to fetch most of the marks. This is the area where most of the marks are awarded. Now, there are a lot of questions in the minds of people, what to write, what not to write. There are some questions that all of you have. First question many people ask, sir, do I write point-wise or paragraph? Now, this depends on what kind of question there is. There is no one single answer to this, but just think of it from the examiner point of view. Let's assume I am the examiner, I am checking your copies. If I check a copy where there are 20 questions, you have answered all the 20 questions in point-wise, then I as an examiner would think that maybe you don't even know how to write a paragraph. Writing a paragraph-based answer is also a skill. Point-based answers are easier to write. You don't have to frame longer sentences. So me as an examiner might have this thought in my mind that, oh, maybe you are not comfortable in writing long answers, maybe that's a weakness. That's why all the answers have been written point wise. So the ideal approach will be to kind of mix and match. Now that does not mean there has to be a 50-50 division, but depending upon what kind of question there is. Point wise are easier to write, you don't have to frame many long sentences. It is easier to read also, easier to write as well. But again, the paragraph based form answers are also important. They are mainly important for the optional papers. In the optional examination, whichever optional that you have, usually prefer paragraph based answers because those are much dense. They have to go into much more detail. Use keywords wherever important, wherever it is possible. For example, there's a question about NALSA, right? Now, NALSA question was about the free legal aid. You have to compulsorily mention that the directive principles of the state policy talk about giving free legal aid. Make sure you remember the article number as well. These important keywords can make or break your answer. Even if you do not write the article number, even if you do not mention that it's a part of directive principles, it's not that your answer will be entirely wrong. But identifying keywords and then making sure those keywords are a part of your answer, it is extremely necessary. Don't think that I'm oversimplifying it. No, when the examiner is checking your copy, he or she wants to see the keywords which are important and relevant here. This gives an indication that you actually know this topic. For example, let's assume you are writing about Supreme Court and you're writing about, let's assume, the Supreme Court's power of judicial review. Then you have to explain what judicial review is, talk about, use the word judicial review, use the word judicial activism, use articles which are related to it, use article number 142 for instance. You cannot avoid these keywords. The important keywords which are related to the answer have to be mentioned there. If you don't mention it, it will become a very generic answer and that will never fetch you good marks. Then, the more examples you give, the better. This is true for almost all the papers except history, of course. Apart from history, especially in GS2, GS3, the more contemporary examples, even in GS4, the more contemporary examples that you give related to what is happening these days or something that would have happened a few months back, the more connections that you can build, the better it is. For example, let's say in governance, there is a question on use of technology. There is a question on e-governance. Unless you give examples of how the government is using technology, let's say the UPI, let's say Digi Yatra, let's say Digi Locker, unless you give these real examples, contemporary examples which are related to this, your answer will only be very generic and it will not give you good marks. So when you think, oh, I've written a good answer, I've written more than 200 words, why am I not getting good marks? Maybe this is the reason. Think of it from the examiner point of view. If as an examiner, I am checking 25-30 copies in a day, if in every copy I have the same thing written, why will I give you more marks than others? Think of it from my point of view. If I have to give you even one extra mark, you have to give me the reason for it. And the reason has to be that, see, I have taken the pain to connect it with something that is happening right now in our society. I can give you real life examples. That becomes, or that makes the answer rather much better. Inclusion of flowchart, diagram, but again, when needed. I have seen a lot of students, because they want to make flowcharts and diagram, they'll make a flowchart of anything. They'll make a flowchart just writing something like this, write something in the middle, and then they will make 4 or 5 arms. Now, when it is necessary, when it is important, when it is something that helps you out, please do that. But if it is not helping you out, if it is not relevant to the answer, please don't do that. When it looks forced, you are doing it just because you want to include a diagram, please don't do that. Only when needed, only when it will help you in explaining the concept, only when you think it will help you in, let's say, reducing time to write the answer, then use it. Making a diagram, making a flowchart in each and every answer will never suit your purpose. It will not be helpful for you. So make sure that you do not make this mistake. Similarly, don't go over when it comes to underlining stuff. I have a lot of students who will underline every single thing, barring 1 or 2 words. That is not the way to go about it. Underlining something or highlighting something means you want the examiner to pay more attention to those words. But if you are underlining 70% of the words, what do you expect the examiner to do? Do you expect the examiner to put equal and increased attention on 70% words? That takes away the essence of underlining. Underline when it is important, when it is required. Underline the key words, underline the key aspects of the answer. But if you keep underlining each and everything, that takes away from how the answer has to be perceived. These are some of the things that you have to keep in mind while writing the main body. Also, I will tell you how to write an answer with an exact real example. So don't go anywhere. As we go ahead, we will take an example as well. You will write the concluding part in the end or the way forward part. Way forward is written usually when the question is asking you about a problem or an issue. For example, the question is something about poverty. Let's say question is something about corruption. Or the question is something about a decision. Let's say, should India join or should India come out of the NAM or not? Should India come out of BRICS or not? When these kind of questions are asked, then you have to give a way forward of what can be done next. So that you are telling the examiner that I know the problem and I know the solution part as well. But when the question is just asking you something in general, for example, history-based questions which will not have a way forward. There are questions where you just have to ask or you just have to tell a specific definition. You can't really give a way forward. In those cases, just summarize the main body. So either conclude or give a way forward depending upon what kind of question there is. Again, if the question asks you about a problem, if the question has an issue, then give the way forward. What can be done going forward? If not, then just summarize it. Now, if you have understood this, let's go ahead and write a proper answer. I have taken a question from the UPSC paper of GS1. Let's see what the question is. The question in 2023 was, explain why suicide among young women is increasing in Indian society. This is the same question which I showed you as an example. It's a GS1 question 2023. Now, how do you attempt this question? As I told you earlier, there is no important or technical word which you can define. If there's nothing to define, you have to start with a fact. This is where it is important to have notes about things that are important and repeated themes in the answer writing. For example, we'll start with a fact here. Now, the fact that I have taken is official data from National Crime Record Bureau. Whenever you are quoting any data, be it suicide, be it poverty, be it, let's say, corruption, inflation, whenever you are quoting any such data or growth numbers, it is always advisable to quote the data through a government source. It will always help you. It will give much more authenticity to your answer as well. So we start with, as per the National Crime Record Bureau, suicide rate amongst young women has risen from this to this in 2021. Now, if you do not have this data, what do? There is no easy way to say this. If you do not have this data, if you don't have any data about suicide, what do? Then you can start the introduction with something like, number of suicide amongst women have been increasing in the Indian society, which is a major cause of concern. This can be a generic intro. Obviously, it is not as good as giving the facts. But again, if you don't have facts, you have to give something. So the answer in that case would be, as I said, just write in generic that number of suicide amongst women is increasing, which is a worrying trend. Now, do you jump from here to the main body or not? Do you say, I have written the introduction, let me jump to the main body? Is that how it works? See, you can jump to the main body from here, that is also fine. But the ideal answer usually follows a structure where after introduction you have to give a connecting line also. It's always advisable to give a connecting line from intro to the main body. This can be the connecting line. That is, you have just given a fact. The question is about the fact that number of suicides are increasing. So when you tell the reasons, give a connecting line. For example, this trend calls for urgent action on the front of well-being and mental health for our future generation. Something like this. It is not necessary to give a connecting line. I won't say that it is necessary in every single part, but it just adds a good flow. Imagine when you're reading an article in the newspaper. How do you see the flow? Would the author just give a fact and then move on to the main point? No, the author makes a flow from the introduction to the main body part. This is what you are also expected to do. Now we'll come to the main body. In the main body, we'll have to focus on what are the factors that have led to increasing number of suicides. There can be hundreds of factors. I am not saying that there are only 4 or 5. So depending upon what you think should come at the top, you can do that. This is the difference between a UPSC answer and an answer in school or college. No one answer is perfect. Whatever you think and can explain better, that has to be the first point. For example, first point, feeling of relative deprivation. There are traditional terms, there are societal pressures, there are expectations on the society that a woman has to do this, women should marry by this age, women should give birth to a child by this age, so on and so forth. Now the question is, can you just write this much and not explain? No. Every point that you write here has to be explained. At least one line explanation. Make sure that whatever point you give is explained in at least one line, if not more. Your words can be different. Your explanation can be different. Second point is impact of modernity on marriage. For example, instances of intercaste, interfaith marriages, live-in relationships, many of them do not end up well. And when they do not end up well, we have seen suicides amongst women increasing. Next factor can be changes in the family system. Over 50% female suicides are housewives. This is again a data that you can find from National Crime Record Bureau. As you can see again, wherever possible, give examples. Wherever possible, give data that will add authenticity to your answer. Then patriarchy, gender discrimination, issues of domestic violence, marital rape, dowry harassment, all of these are a reality. Domestic violence, again, I have given data from National Family Health Survey. National Family Health Survey is extremely important, which you should all read. These are the pointers, including early marriage, which has led to increasing suicides amongst women. Now again, these are not the only points. If you have some other points in your mind, please feel free to include those. If you don't remember many of these, you can write whatever you remember at that point of time. When you are practicing answer writing, let's assume you're not writing in the exam right now, just practicing it. While practicing it, if you come across this question, suicide amongst women, and you don't know the numbers, what do you do? My advice is, while you're practicing answer writing and you don't have a fact, you need to remember certain facts, don't worry, do a Google search. The focus while practicing is not on how much have you remembered. The focus is, can you write an answer if I give you the data? So don't worry about doing a Google search about certain data while practicing answer writing. I'm repeating it once again. If you are practicing answer writing, you come across this question, you don't know what the facts are, you don't know what the data is, feel free to do a Google search, but make sure after you write the answer, next time when a similar question comes, you remember the data. As long as that is fine, as long as you remember the data for the next time onwards, you are in good hands. So don't worry, go ahead and do a Google search if you want to while you're writing the answer. try and remember for the next time, because while practicing answer writing, the goal is not really right now to see how much you have remembered. The goal right now is to see whether or not you are able to write the answer if you are given all that data. Then we will conclude. The conclusion part again has to be kind of a way forward in this case, because there's a problem that has been asked. We have written about the factors. Way forward as in giving suggestions. How to curtail the growing suicide rate amongst women. That can be gender sensitization programs. Again, if you have any example, please feel free to give. You can even write here the role of National Commission for Women, any initiatives that they have launched which might have played a big role. Talk about collective efforts of family members, policymakers, NGOs. Again, there are millions of ways to write a conclusion. The more real examples that you can give, if you can give an example of a real government initiative, write example of the suicide helpline that the government has, any initiative that the National Commission for Women is running. All these are important additions to your answer. This is how you can conclude. Now, as I said, after each and every answer that I write, I will give you a homework. So this is the homework for you. This is the question I want you to write an answer to, and the answer has to be written in 200 words. Read the question carefully. How do you have to write it? Either write it in the comment section below. Everyone can see and give feedback to each other. I can also give you feedback. If you don't want to do that, you can mail me the answer as well. This is my email ID. I'll be giving you feedback here. Again, I will be regular with this series, but only as regular as you are. So make sure you make it a habit to watch all these videos where we try and decode previous year questions, see how to write the answers, complete all these homeworks, and I promise by the end of it, you will master the skill of answer writing. Thank you so much. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, invite your friends here as well, and leave a comment on new initiative that you want me to start. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.